lives on Birchview Drive in Ellington remembers that awful day.
It was shock. There was just no way in the world that you could comprehend it.
A morning that seemed peaceful suddenly became the starting point of a serious tragedy inside the home at 7 Birchview Drive. Alarms blared, police surrounded the neighborhood, and the first accounts sent chills through everyone. But what worried people the most wasn't even mentioned in the 911 call.
911, hello? Hello.
What exactly happened inside that house? Connie Margot Dabate, 39 years old, lived in Ellington, Connecticut, with her husband, Richard Dabate, 40 years old, and their 2 sons, Richard Jr., often called R.J., who was 9, and his younger brother Connor, who was 6. She grew up in Rockville, in a large, lively family, filled with constant laughter and conversation. As an adult, Connie especially loved hosting gatherings where friends and relatives could come together, enjoy the meals she prepared, and join in fun games. For Connie, there was no holiday in the year without a plan to make it feel special, from Christmas and New Year's to Halloween. While many people gradually drift apart after high school and college, Connie always found ways to reconnect by taking the lead in organizing alumni get-togethers. Friends described her as energetic, outgoing, and someone who was always ready to offer advice or show up the moment anyone needed help, no matter the time of day. At a summer party, Connie met Richard Dabate, a computer technician, and although many people thought they weren't the type to match well, the two quickly proved they complemented each other. As they spent more time together, friends noticed that Richard had a playful, slightly clumsy but likable personality, often trying to make everyone in the room laugh, and Connie shared the same vibrant energy. When Richard brought Connie home to meet his family, his mother said she immediately felt Connie was someone truly special. On July 4th, 2003, they married and built a peaceful life in a small home at 7 Birchview Drive in the suburbs of Ellington. When R.J. and Connor were born, the parties Connie hosted became even more elaborate and creative, from props and decorations to fun costumes designed to surprise her 2 sons. One Easter, she told the boys that if they threw marshmallows into the yard before going to sleep, they would find lollipops growing in their place the next morning. After night fell, Connie went outside, picked up the marshmallows, and scattered lollipops around the yard to create a magical moment for the kids. She was always someone who did everything wholeheartedly, with care and creativity, always wanting to bring joy and laughter to those around her. On December 23, 2015, just 2 days before Christmas, the home at 7 Birchview Drive had already been fully decorated by Connie and Richard, with neatly arranged gifts placed under the tree. Connie was excited for the upcoming holiday season and the time she would spend with her 2 sons. That morning, she got R.J. and Connor ready for school, while Richard drove them and then returned home to change clothes before heading to work. Connie was getting ready to attend a cycling class at the nearby Indian Valley YMCA. Close to 11 a.m. Residents along Birchview Drive suddenly noticed an alarm blaring from the Dabate family's home, followed by several patrol cars racing down the usually quiet street. Authorities arrived because the house's security system had been triggered, along with a brief 911 call that had been routed to the dispatch center.
911, hello? Hello.
Rumors quickly spread that there had been an intrusion at 7 Birchview Drive. where Connie and Richard were said to have encountered a masked man who was now fleeing the area. Police immediately went door to door to check whether the stranger might be hiding in any nearby home. They instructed residents to bring everyone in the household into a single room, lock the door, and remain absolutely still until an all clear was given. The entire neighborhood waited in silence, anxious about what was unfolding. But what had happened inside the Dabate home was far more serious than the rumors spreading outside. Richard was found tied to a chair, showing signs of injuries, lying on the floor with the overturned chair on top of him, and he was taken to an ambulance in an unstable condition. In the basement area, authorities discovered Connie showing no signs of life, with 2 serious wounds to her head and abdomen that were determined to have been caused by a dangerous object. After searching the entire property, detectives concluded that the unknown intruder was believed to have already left the scene, and residents along Birchview Drive were allowed to come out of their temporary shelter. As they stepped outside, all they saw were yellow evidence tapes, flashing patrol lights, and numerous officers carrying out their duties, creating a scene that looked as if it had been lifted straight from a dark, true crime documentary. After receiving initial treatment at the hospital, Richard Dabate was stable enough to undergo an interview with detectives. Still shaken, he recounted the events of the morning of December 23, 2015. He said he left the house at 8 a.m. to take R.J. and Connor to school, then returned around 8:30 a.m. to change his shirt before going to work. When he came back, he saw Connie getting her workout gear ready and pulling out of the driveway to attend a cycling class at the Indian Valley YMCA. But the class had been canceled, so she returned shortly after. About 10 minutes after leaving home, Richard said he suddenly remembered he had forgotten his laptop and turned the car around. While driving back, he received a notification from the home security system stating that the alarm had been triggered due to an unusual activity inside. He emailed his supervisor to say he would be late so he could check the situation. Richard said he returned to the house sometime between 8:45 a.m. and 9 a.m. And when he walked in, he heard noises coming from the second floor. When he went upstairs to check, he claimed he saw a large man dressed in camouflage with his face covered, rummaging through Connie's jewelry. The man turned toward him, raised a sharp object in a threatening manner, and demanded cash, credit cards, and PIN numbers. Richard stated that he handed over his wallet. Although the man's face was completely concealed, Richard estimated he was about 6'2", heavily built, with a deep voice, even comparing his physique to actor Vin Diesel. Richard said that everything happened so quickly afterward that he didn't have time to react. He recounted hearing Connie return home and shouting for her to leave immediately to avoid any danger.
So I yelled to her to get out of the house. My wife didn't run. She must have ran into the basement because we have 2 guns in the house. One was in the basement in a lockbox and one's in our closet. She ran downstairs.
Richard stated that he believed Connie ran down to the basement to retrieve a dangerous object kept in the house for self-defense. The masked man then chased after her, and Richard said he heard 2 loud sounds coming from that area. At about 9:05 a.m., he ran downstairs and saw Connie lying motionless on the floor with no signs of life, while the man was holding a dangerous object that belonged to their family. Richard said the intruder then used a sharp tool to injure his leg, tied him to a chair with restraints, and pressed a heat-producing device against him before fleeing.
I'm sitting in the chair, I was kind of half tied up, in shock, I guess.
What do you mean half tied up?
I had one leg free and an arm free. He tied one leg, tied one arm, and he tied my neck fairly tight with a tie wrap. And I got a torch to kind of just blow in his mask a little bit, and it caught on fire. He dropped a blowtorch. I was starting to scream for help. I screamed for help. I couldn't hear a soul. I got really, really dizzy.
Richard stated that during the struggle, he managed to grab the heat-producing device and aim it toward the masked man, causing him to flee the scene. Still restrained to the chair, Richard dragged himself and the chair up the stairs to the kitchen area, where he pressed the emergency alarm button connected to the home's security system, and then made a brief 911 call before authorities arrived. Richard's account left detectives unsure where to begin, but they quickly started gathering statements from neighbors and friends of the Dabate family. Several friends said that in the months before the incident, Connie and Richard had been involved in a dispute with a contractor named Ken because they were unhappy with the quality of his work and had taken him to court to recover money. After the lawsuit, the windshield of one of their family vehicles was damaged, leading Connie to believe Ken might have been involved and making her so worried that, despite her fear of dangerous objects, she agreed to let Richard purchase a self-defense item and keep it in the basement. Forensic tests later showed that this was the device responsible for the injuries that caused Connie's passing. When questioned, Ken admitted that his working relationship with the Dabates had ended poorly and that he was upset about losing money, but he insisted he had moved on. He fully cooperated, allowing photographs, a home search, and an examination of his personal devices. His record showed no prior offenses or violent behavior, and his height, build, and voice did not match the description Richard provided. Additionally, because Ken had been to their home many times, if he had truly been the person present during the incident, Richard would likely have recognized him even with his face covered. Ken's alibi was fully verified, and he was quickly removed from the list of suspects. In the week after Christmas, while many people were preparing to enter the new year, Connie's family, friends, and the Ellington community gathered to hold a memorial service for her. The large turnout was no surprise, as Connie was loved by many. Hundreds of people stood in long lines in the cold weather to pay their respects. Two close friends who had known Connie for more than 20 years, who frequently visited the Dabate home and had known Richard for a long time, waited nearly 3 hours to speak with him at the service. When their turn came, they were taken aback when he asked, with a detached tone, "How do you two know my wife?" A reaction that left them confused because of how unfamiliar it sounded. They assumed it might have been the result of pressure and grief, so they did not question it further, though they still found it difficult to understand. They also noticed that Richard showed no clear signs of injuries on his body, even though he had claimed he had been attacked. What was even more surprising was that during Connie's memorial service, Richard left earlier than everyone else, something that made many attendees question his behavior.
You'd think that they would have any sort of lead by this point, right?
2 weeks and still no arrest in the murder of a young Ellington mother. 39-year-old Connie Dabate was found dead just before Christmas.
Police responded to her Birchview Drive home after the house alarm was activated. They found her husband, Richard Dabate, injured inside the smoky home. Police later found Connie with gunshot wounds to the head and stomach. Her death ruled a homicide, but police have yet to make an arrest, and they've said there is no threat to the public. Still, the entire situation putting residents around town on edge.
Understandably, Fox 61's Katie Corrado went to Ellington today to get some answers. She joins us now with the very latest. Katie?
Audrey and Brent, this murder happened on December 23rd, and people in town tell me the more time passes without answers, the more the rumor mill seems to churn.
I mean, these guys are like family. You know, these ladies have been coming in forever.
Luann Lanzieri hears a lot of the Ellington town chatter inside her nail salon on West Road.
And there's a lot of rumors going around.
Rumors about the murder of Ellington mom mom, Connie Dabate, and 2 weeks since the crime, there's still been no arrest.
It seems like every day someone's coming in and asking, have you heard anything else? This is what we heard.
Luann says most people are confident the police will find whoever killed her childhood friend.
I grew up with her in Vernon as well when she was little, and she was always a wonderful person, so I hope they find the correct person that did this to her.
The other neighbors we talked to did not want to go on camera, but say it is scary and nerve-wracking to know there has not been an arrest. They say this is what everyone around town is talking about, and they just want an answer. But answers so far are scarce.
The detectives are working very hard. They're waiting for a lot of evidence to come back from the labs. They want all their ducks in a row before they can make a decision of what's going on.
Ellington First Selectman Lori Spielman says she's in touch with police nearly every day and has been told this was an isolated incident.
Any idea when something might be coming?
I don't know, maybe next week, but they are still waiting for some of the evidence to come back from the labs.
We reached out to state police tonight for an update on the investigation, but have not heard back. We also tried contacting Connie's husband, Rick Dabate, but he has not responded.
In the days that followed, Richard appeared surprisingly relaxed, often going out for meals, meeting friends, hosting gatherings at his home, and behaving as though no serious incident had just taken place. According to those who knew him, if someone didn't already know what had happened, it would have been difficult to guess that his wife had just gone through a tragic event, and that he himself had claimed to have been assaulted. On social media, Richard posted that he was trying to stay strong for his two sons and thanked the community for their support. Even so, many residents in town quickly noticed that his behavior seemed unusual. From friends and relatives to the investigators, more and more people began to feel that parts of Richard's story did not quite add up, leading them to question what had truly happened. At Birchview Drive, the initial investigation moved slowly because no neighbors had seen or heard anything unusual at the time of the incident, which was understandable since the houses in the area were spaced far apart. The scene showed no clear signs of a forced entry, although a basement window was found slightly ajar and was considered a possible entry point for the alleged intruder. However, nothing inside the home was missing or disturbed. K9 units also failed to detect any unfamiliar scent inside the house. The first dog brought to the scene repeatedly returned to the ambulance where Richard was lying, and the next two were also unable to trace any indication that someone had escaped the area. The wallet Richard said the man had taken was found just outside the house with all of its contents intact. The dangerous object that caused Connie's injuries also showed no fingerprints from anyone, including the intruder, Richard, or Connie. The sharp object injuries found on Richard were assessed by medical staff as superficial and not consistent with the intense confrontation he had described. During his work with detectives, Richard's statements became increasingly inconsistent. Details he had initially insisted were certain were later replaced with vague answers, such as, "I don't know." He shifted from saying he heard Connie being attacked to claiming he saw it happen, and then later said he neither heard nor saw anything at all. With the first responding officers, Richard said the person responsible was still somewhere inside the house. But when speaking with another group of detectives, he stated that he had seen the man leave the scene. Richard also said the incident occurred shortly before 9 a.m. and that Connie was harmed about 5 minutes later. Yet the 911 data showed the signal was sent out close to 10:30 a.m., creating a significant time gap that his statements could not explain. One day after Connie's passing, on Christmas Eve, Richard hired a defense attorney to represent him. About a week later, he filed a claim requesting $475,000 from Connie's life insurance policy and also withdrew $93,000 from an investment account she owned. There were signs that Connie and Richard's relationship was not as perfect as they appeared to friends and acquaintances, and that behind closed doors, there were issues that had never been shared. In December 2014, Connie created a note on her iPhone titled, "Why I Want a Divorce," in which she listed the things that were causing strain in the marriage. Connie wrote that Richard handled money irresponsibly, often used accounts that did not belong to him, and although he apologized, he never took responsibility for his actions. She said she did not know what Richard did each day, who he talked to, or what was happening in his life outside of work. Connie shared that she was tired of covering things up, tired of pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. However, in the section she titled, "Reasons to Stay in the Marriage," Connie also admitted that everyone around them liked Richard, that he was fun when he was in a good mood, that she still found him attractive, and that she felt she could be herself when she was with him. The question now was what motive could have led to the incident. And although authorities did not release information publicly in the early stages, they had actually identified a direction of suspicion from the very first interview with Richard at the hospital. At that time, Richard admitted he had been involved in an extramarital relationship with a woman named Sarah, a former high school acquaintance whom Connie knew well and who had even read a speech at their wedding. According to his statement, Richard and Sarah had maintained a relationship for years, but their encounters became more frequent starting in May 2015. The following month, Sarah discovered she was pregnant and was said to have asked Richard to end his marriage to Connie so they could address the situation between them. During the 7-hour interview at the hospital, Richard voluntarily mentioned Sarah and admitted that they had an intimate relationship. He explained that it stemmed from Sarah's desire to have a child of her own. According to Richard, Sarah had once asked him and Connie for support because she wanted to become a single mother but was struggling with the cost, and she had asked whether Richard could act as a donor under a private arrangement.
We were going to donate sperm to her to have a kid.
Richard stated that because the cost of going through a medical facility was too high, the two of them agreed to proceed in what he called the usual way, meaning without any medical assistance involved.
Untraditional, but traditional in the way that the baby was conceived?
Yeah.
Okay.
The detective continued with another question. So, did Connie know you were helping Sarah become pregnant? Richard answered yes, insisting that Connie not only knew but also agreed to the entire arrangement and, according to him, was even the one who suggested the idea in the first place.
Do you think your wife had any issues with that?
It was her idea, in a way.
Richard's explanation quickly raised doubts for the detectives, especially after they learned he had previously admitted to friends that Sarah's pregnancy was completely unplanned. He then offered a different story, claiming that Connie could no longer have more children despite wanting to, and that Sarah had volunteered to carry a baby for them so all three could raise the child together. However, when investigators pressed further and pointed out several inconsistencies, Richard changed his story again, eventually admitting that the pregnancy had simply been an accident and that his relationship with Sarah had, in reality, been a month-long affair.
Was her getting pregnant unexpected?
It was unexpected.
Richard began lying to Connie about his schedule, often saying he had to work late or meet friends when he was actually spending time with Sarah and expressing his feelings for her, even telling her he was about to file for divorce. At the time Connie faced her tragedy, Sarah was only 8 weeks away from giving birth to their daughter. Not long before that, Richard had taken Connie on a romantic trip to Vermont. And when Connie posted photos of the trip on Facebook, Sarah saw them and realized Richard had not followed through on his promises about leaving the marriage. Whether Connie ever discovered the affair or the pregnancy remained unclear, but close friends believed that if she had known, she certainly would have confided in someone. regardless of which specific detail was true. The broader context suggested that Richard may have wanted to remove Connie from his life to begin a new path and, in his view, resolve the problems he had created for himself. In June 2015, Richard had consulted a divorce attorney. Though he never filed any official paperwork, data from his phone showed that 2 days before the tragedy, Richard texted Sarah saying he was going to leave Connie, and just 1 day later, he sent another message expressing affection and promising to see her the following day. Connie's phone that same day recorded a text message argument in which she confronted Richard about lying regarding a bill and expressed her frustration over having to keep dealing with problems he caused. She wrote, "You lied to me and I'm the one cleaning up your mess again. A wonderful vacation and a Merry Christmas." Richard replied, "It will be a very Merry Christmas." Connie had no idea that Richard was using a secret credit card to buy flowers for Sarah, book hotel rooms, and spend more than $1,000 at an adult entertainment venue. Search data on Richard's devices also showed that he had looked up combinations of over-the-counter medications that could cause serious harm, homemade dangerous substances that were difficult to trace, and certain odorless compounds that were easy to obtain. And while these details alone raised significant suspicion, there was still another major piece of evidence, one that required additional time to analyze before authorities could fully use it. By Christmas 2016, then into the new year, and even into the spring of 2017, the investigation was still ongoing. Connie was an active person and wore her Fitbit every day to track her movements. The day of the tragedy was no exception. When investigators obtained data from the device, they realized the recorded timeline was completely different from what Richard had described. Authorities already knew that Richard had waited more than an hour before making the 911 call, and they had once believed this delay might have come from panic, injury, or confusion about time, as he had claimed. However, when they compared Connie's Fitbit data with CCTV footage, computer records, the home alarm activation logs, and other electronic records, a precise timeline of that morning began to take shape, one that differed significantly from the entire account Richard had provided. Electronic data showed that at 8:26 a.m. and 8:27 a.m., Richard was using Facebook on the home computer at the exact time he claimed he had already left for work. At 8:41 a.m., his computer was used again to log into Outlook.com. Meanwhile, Richard stated that he only returned home between 8:45 a.m. and 9 a.m. to confront an unknown man, and that Connie came back immediately afterward and encountered danger. However, Connie's Fitbit recorded her leaving the house at 8:46 a.m. to attend her cycling class at the Indian Valley YMCA. 1 minute later, Richard logged into the home alarm system to attempt to deactivate it. At 8:50 a.m., he successfully turned the alarm off, then reactivated it at 8:59 a.m., and then disabled it again using the remote device at 8:53 a.m. Connie arrived at the YMCA and sent a Facebook message to her therapist just minutes after entering the building. At 9:04 a.m., Richard emailed his supervisor, although he claimed he sent it while stopped in his car. The data showed it came from the home IP address. At 9:08 a.m., Connie left her class and returned to her car. 10 minutes later, Richard accessed the Indian Valley YMCA website, the same place Connie had just been. At 9:23 a.m., Connie's Fitbit registered movement as the garage door at the house opened. From 9:40 a.m. to 9:46 a.m., the device continued to record her using Facebook. During this period, investigators believed Richard may have attempted to lead Connie toward the basement. At 10:05 a.m., the Fitbit captured Connie's final movements. And at 10:12 a.m., the emergency alarm button connected to the home security system was activated using Richard's remote device. The collected data showed that Connie was still moving normally nearly an hour after the time Richard claimed she had shown no signs of life, and the entire real timeline did not align with any part of his account. The records revealed that Richard had not left the house as he stated. The time markers did not match at all, and Connie's movements and heart rate showed no indication of panic or of fleeing from an unknown person inside the home, completely contradicting the story of an intrusion that Richard had described. In the end, in April 2017.
Husband arrested, charged with murdering his wife more than a year ago.
Connie Dabate, an Ellington mother of two, brutally murdered in her home 2 days before Christmas. Well, tonight, finally, a break in that case. A newly released 50-page arrest warrant revealing what was happening inside that home, inside that marriage.
Yeah, we also have this exclusive video showing Mr. Dabate being transported by state police tonight.
Richard was later arrested and charged with causing the tragedy that befell Connie, along with offenses related to falsifying evidence and providing false information to authorities.
Grant says Dabate is being held under a $1 million bond and is scheduled to appear in court on Monday. State police say the investigation turned over every stone.
It's very important to follow all leads, follow all evidence, speak to all witnesses, any potential suspects. This is about the victim.
Grant says the lengthy investigation was a collaborative effort from several factions of law enforcement. She claims it was necessary to be extremely thorough during the process in order to prevent possible mistrials in the future. Community members reacting to the arrest of Rick Dabate right in their own backyard.
Anytime somebody loses their life is unfortunate, especially when it's divested.
Friday afternoon, neighbors say 40-year-old Dabate was pulling onto the family street when he was served an arrest warrant for the murder of his wife, Connie. And now community members feel justice is on the horizon.
They wouldn't bring the case up if they didn't really have a lot of evidence that it was the husband.
Evidence that took nearly a year and a half to gather. Community members say the lengthy investigation is a positive.
Nowadays, the police, they got to cross every T and dot every I before they can come after you, really, or they can blow the whole case. A good lawyer will get them off.
Fortunately, you have a murderer running around the streets if it's supposed to be him, but the good side about that means they did a thorough investigation. So hopefully, like I said, justice be served.
Still, people in town are still shaken by the crime.
It's kind of a dangerous world, rough world, dangerous country. Well, you got to watch your back.
Now, we reached out to Dabate's attorney tonight, and he just sent us this statement, which reads, "My client is innocent of these charges, and he looks forward to be vindicated after trial."
Richard posted a $1 million bond and was allowed to remain free while awaiting trial. During this period, he continued to take part in caring for and raising the child he had with Sarah. Another tragedy struck in 2019 when Connie's father passed away. He had battled illness for a long time and had always hoped to see the day when the truth would be revealed and justice served for his daughter. But according to Connie's brother, his health gradually declined and he passed without seeing the person responsible brought before the court. Richard's trial was initially scheduled for April 2020. But just as jury selection had finished, the pandemic erupted and Richard's attorney passed away, causing all proceedings to be delayed. It was not until April 2022 that the trial officially began, marking more than 6 years since Connie's tragedy.
We have a murder trial that has gained worldwide attention.
Now, cameras are not allowed in the courtroom for this trial, but we are allowed to sit in and listen. The now former detective told jurors that Richard Dabate gave law enforcement consent to search his Ellington home, his iPhone, and also allow them to swab him for DNA and gunshot residue. The state presented other evidence, including photographs of Richard Dabate's injuries while he was in his hospital bed, along with clothing, his hospital socks, and a shoe that had blood on it. Dabate's attorney had this to say outside the courtroom today.
As the trial's ongoing, we would love to make comments day to day as each piece of evidence comes in, explain our defense and explain our side. But what we need to do is respect the process here.
Now, that Fitbit that we've been talking about, that hasn't been mentioned in court just yet, but I'm sure it will be brought up. Tomorrow, though, the jury is expected to listen to the rest of that 4-hour recording. We are live from Rockville. Courtney Zeller, Channel 3 Eyewitness News.
In the trial, roughly 600 pieces of evidence were submitted, and more than 130 witnesses testified, including Richard himself. His defense team argued that authorities had been misled from the start, claiming investigators focused solely on Richard and tried to build a timeline that fit this assumption. However, the investigative record showed that was not true. Police followed every lead Richard provided, including the contractor he had previously disputed with, and each one was ruled out. When all the facts were placed side by side, technology-based evidence, the physical scene, details that did not match Richard's statements, the results from the K-9 units, the inconsistencies across his multiple versions of the story, and his ongoing extramarital relationship. They all pointed in one single direction, indicating that only one person fit the entire picture, Richard himself. Richard's defense team also emphasized that several unidentified DNA samples were found in the house, including one detected on the dangerous object that caused Connie's passing. They argued that the presence of unknown DNA suggested the possibility that someone else had been inside the home. In addition, they referenced the statement of a cleaning worker who claimed to have seen a dark figure moving near a window of the Dabate residence around the time leading up to the incident. However, the prosecution maintained that these details did not change the core nature of the case. They described Richard as a ticking time bomb who had cornered himself, arguing that he caused the tragedy because he believed a divorce would severely damage his personal image, costing him the respect of friends and the community. Prosecutors also contended that Richard faced significant pressure from the financial consequences of a divorce, along with the responsibilities of caring for and obtaining custody of RJ and Connor, and that all of these factors combined had pushed him toward a disastrous decision.
Now, 4 weeks into the trial, one of Connie's sisters took the stand today, saying the family learned she was shot only after a family meeting was held at their parents' home, a day after she was killed. And Richard Dabate was there. She says when he arrived at the home, she heard him say, "I didn't do it. There was someone in the house. They said I need a lawyer." She also says Richard Dabate needed help getting into the house. He looked distraught, physically ill, and it appeared he had been crying. The family gathered around the kitchen table, and she told jurors Richard Dabate told them the story about what happened. He told the family he retained a lawyer, and the lawyer told him not to talk about anything, but believed he owed them an explanation. Connie's sister and her brother-in-law, who also testified today, says Richard Dabate showed no emotion when he told the story. Connie's sister says Richard Dabate mentioned a trip the family was supposed to take after the holidays, going to Great Wolf Lodge, and that he will have to find someone to go with. 7 people who live or lived in the Ellington neighborhood at the time of the crime also testified, saying they didn't see anything out of the ordinary that day.
And the judge mentioned in court today that they are hoping to conclude the state's case by the end, or by the middle, rather, of next week. There is no court tomorrow. It will pick back up on Friday.
Richard took the stand and admitted that he had feelings for both Connie and Sarah, saying he felt trapped between the two relationships. He acknowledged the affair, but insisted that it did not mean he was responsible for the tragedy that befell Connie. Richard said he thought about Connie every day and claimed he would never do anything that could harm his children. Sarah also testified. She said she never intended to break up the Dabate family. In fact, she was fully prepared to raise her daughter on her own, and even stated she would have left Richard's name off the birth certificate if he chose to stay in his marriage. Through tears, Sarah said she felt ashamed and overwhelmed by what had happened, but insisted she never pressured Richard to leave Connie. She stated that there had never been any discussion about causing harm to Connie, and that Richard had never told her he was responsible for the tragedy involving his wife. After 5 weeks of testimony, both the prosecution and the defense concluded their arguments. In May 2022, the jury delivered its verdict for the case.
Guilty on all counts. A jury has reached a verdict in the Richard Dabate murder trial.
Mark and Aaron, a lot of surprise here at the courthouse. The jury probably deliberated for at the most 3 hours. Richard and Connie's families had emotional reactions as the verdict was read.
Connie was essentially sentenced to death, while this convicted murderer has been living his life while out on parole for 6.5 years. There will be no closure for the Margotto family, but there is finally justice for Connie.
She was a terrific sister, mother, daughter. I loved her. I remember when she was born, I'm 10 years older. My father brought me to the hospital to see her for the first time, and the nurse held her up to the window. And that was very memorable, seeing the new baby for the first time.
Richard's defense team said they're prepared to keep fighting for their client.
They only started about 24 hours ago, and it was a 5-week trial, so I'd say we were a bit surprised. I think all three of us very disappointed with the outcome. It's been a lot of effort, an exhaustive case, but again, we're going to have more filings. We'll say more on those. Thank you. Thank you, Trent.
First up right now at 4, we start with some breaking news this afternoon. The man convicted in the Fitbit murder trial will spend 65 years in prison. Thanks for joining us today.
Richard's maximum release date was set for May 2087. Before being escorted out of the courtroom to begin serving his sentence, he declared, "I stand here as an innocent man. I will never stop fighting to seek justice for my wife, Connie, the person I think about every single day." To this day, Richard's parents still believe in their son's innocence and struggle to accept the possibility that he could have lured Connie into the basement just 2 days before Christmas, staged the entire scene, and then continued his life without her as if nothing had happened. In October 2024, Richard filed an appeal of his conviction. His defense attorney, Trent Lima, continued representing him throughout this process.
Defense attorney for Richard Dabate, Trent Lima, addressing 6 justices in a room full of UConn law students, claiming the state prosecutor, Matthew Gdansky, engaged in a pattern of impropriety that denied Dabate a fair trial.
Perhaps some of the most damaging would be the ticking time bomb question, which was 24 hours, almost exactly 24 hours. After that, those notes had been excluded by the trial court. The state asked, "Did you feel like a ticking time bomb?" I mean, ticking time bomb makes my client out to be a dangerous person.
I don't think that there is anything improper at all about using the defendant's own words in a prior inconsistent statement to impeach his testimony when she testifies.
Isn't this supposed to be a fair trial, not a gamesmanship episode?
In many similar cases, the person who causes a tragedy often believes that removing someone is the only way to escape a situation they feel trapped in. Even though they fail to grasp the extent of the hurt their actions inflict on those left behind, the consequences always reach far beyond what they imagined. And Connie Dabate's case is a clear example in the true crime documentary journey we have followed today. Connie's sister, Leslie, is now the one caring for her 2 sons, children who once lived in fear of a supposed stranger breaking into their home because of the false story Richard left behind. And only recently have they begun to understand what truly happened. Connie's mother still cherishes their last phone call, when Connie told her she was her best friend, words that perfectly reflected who Connie was: thoughtful, warm, and someone who made others feel valued. Kim, her closest friend, says she misses Connie's laughter, the feeling Connie brought into every room, and the vibrant energy she shared with everyone around her. Looking back at the entire case, Objective evidence from technology, timestamp data, and the contradictions in testimony shows that the truth cannot be hidden forever. It is a reminder that in every family tragedy, the aftermath follows those who remain for the rest of their lives, and one person's wrong choice can create pain that echoes through generations. Thank you for following today's story in our true crime documentary journey. If you want to honor Connie, please leave a comment below and share the video so more people can learn about her story. Don't forget to like and subscribe to stay with us for the next true crime documentary episodes. See you in the next video.